You know, I had a speech, but just watching George W. has erased the entire thing from my mind. I spent 4 years in Texas. It felt like 20, but it was actually 4 long. From 96 to 2000, when George W. was the governor of Texas before he won the election in 2000. By the way, I am a massive anti-George W. Bush person, and that's compounded by the fact that I'm a Democrat, which actually probably lines up quite neatly. You didn't know this was a political speech, did you? But I've now just been captivated by the fact that global warming apparently is an issue. And what's interesting is my time in purgatory, the time I spent in Texas, defines a great deal of who I am today. I spent the entire 4 years driven solely by revenge. I was running a turnaround company that had purchased my company and then taken all my money from me, so I was broke and in Texas. So there's a term for that. Oh yeah, grumpy. And the entire time I was there, and my entire motivation was to run this public company just well enough to sell it. That's all I wanted to do. And I did. I achieved this in 2000. And my primary turnaround mechanism, because I'm not a turnaround guy. I'm somebody who starts businesses. I'm not terribly good at managing people. I'm not terribly good at managing businesses, in fact. My narrow talent, such as it is in having an idea, getting the thing started, finding people who are actually qualified, putting them in place, and then getting out of the way. And then usually a period of time later, receiving some recompensation for my efforts in the beginning. And yet I found myself cast by accident in the role of turning a business around. And I began to do this, and I failed at it miserably the first time I tried, because the first time I tried to do it was to gather all this 4,000 or 5,000 people, not necessarily in one room, but virtually in a room, and say, hey guys, we're in this together, and we need to innovate our way out of it. And they looked at me like I was an idiot, because you don't innovate your way out of trouble, apparently. Or so I then learned, at least not in Texas. You might shoot your way out, but definitely not innovate your way out. And so I tried again. This time I took a different approach. I let go half of the company that I thought was the half that wasn't doing a good job. But much like Marshall Fields said in the 20 about advertising, he said, half my advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half. So too, half my company wasn't performing, I didn't know which half, and I sort of sliced it in the middle. Didn't work either. What ended up working was I had my own company buy itself out. So I broke it out into little divisions, and I took each division, I said, what does this group do? Right, you do this. I said, are they effective at it? And they had 2 choices, yes or no. If it was yes, I left them alone. I gave them a goal, and I sent them out and pretended they were a startup. If it was a no, I found an outside company that was doing well, that was small, and I bought it with the promise that they got to run the company on the inside. So for example, I bought a small company in Portland, Oregon to run our business process software division. 10 people, $50 million business inside, $1 million business outside. It was the deal of a lifetime for these guys. Walked into their office and I said, I'm going to buy you. And now you're going to be in charge of the business that's acquiring you. It's great fun. I'm doing it myself. You'll enjoy it. I was lying. I hated it. But it was a good sales trick. I brought them in and I did reverse takeover after reverse takeover. 4 years later, the company had in fact turned around. What turned it around, interestingly enough, was merely a state of mind. And it was a state of mind I couldn't get from the people inside that I got from people outside. And at the time, I was primarily what I would call an instinctive actor, meaning I didn't really reflect terribly much on how I operated and what I did. And now I spend a lot of time thinking about what I do because I'm old and tired, and thus I tread more gently. But on looking back at what definitely worked, it was finding people whose mindset was solely grounded in the unreal. People whose everyday lives were a preoccupation that they had to deal with because they really cared about the future. And I really care about the future. And I spend most of my life in a fanciful land of my own devising. I have a great internal fantasy life, and I live there. And I've spent 25 years living there. And that future is very interesting. And so I had as usual, I'm passionate about the thing of the moment. And for example, the thing of the moment for me right now is the future of mobile industry, shall we say, and why the mobile is important. I would go much further. I'd say the mobile is everything. I'd say the only device that matters is your mobile phone. I can give you some fascinating statistics on this. There's a new young company that started in Eastern Europe about 9 months ago called It's My. They do a very basic thing. They do a little website, a WAP page, that lets you share content on a mobile phone. And they gave a speech of, gosh, it could have only been 4 weeks ago, and they had the most startling statistic. They've got about 2 million users spread across about 200 countries, mostly emerging markets. And they said 25% of their users have never heard a landline ringtone. The implications of this are interesting. That means 1/4 of the people who are using this mobile social networking service for content sharing, what I would consider a reasonably advanced activity, have never had a landline phone in their lives. They are all new market. They're all part of a world that is not in large part visible to us today. There's a science fiction author named William Gibson, whose quote I like to poach regularly, sometimes I attribute it to him, and he says, "The future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed." If you want to see the future of our lives here in the UK, the easiest way to do it is to go where the future's already arrived and take a look at how it's acting. So if, by way of example, you're interested in the future, as I happen to be about mobile phones, and you want to start a company that's going to impact and change the world and bring the future to wherever you are, the easiest way to do it is the way I do it. This is my assertion. So when I started my newest software company, TrueTap, I asked myself, where is the future when it comes to mobile telephony? The answer, in large part, is in Japan and South Korea. Because in Japan and South Korea, by a series of accidents of fate, the key infrastructure necessary for the future to arrive got there first. And so they're running 4 years ahead of us, I would assert. So I looked for the person who knew it all. I do love an expert to poach everything they've done. As it happens, her name is Mizuko Ito. She's a social ethnographer, a MacArthur Foundation grant winner, who has spent her entire adult career looking at how Kitai culture, how the mobile phone culture has impacted Japan, its citizens, its individuals, its lives, its young people. And she's written books, very large, reasonably tedious works on this material, and thus you kind of have to do what I do, skim. But there are parts that are of deep significance. And in understanding that, you then don't actually have to invent the future, do you? You just have to transport it. You just have to take it from where it is there and bring it to where it's not. And if there's a few technical obstacles in the way, well, hell, you got yourself a defensible business. So for example, she wrote one paragraph in one section of one monograph that I based the whole company on. She painted a picture of a moment in the life of a Japanese teenage girl on a Saturday in a mall. And I said, I want to deliver that experience to the globe. I'll paint the picture for you. She said, it is currently the habit of this is, say, we're now looking back about a year. It is currently the habit of a Japanese teenage girl, if they have a specific service, to, if they want to feel angst, if they want to feel sad, what they do is they engage in a game where which loosely translates as ships passing in the night, where they will go into a mall, a shopping mall, and they will turn on their phone, and their phone will tell them, based on the settings they set, whether the love of their life is nearby. But it won't tell them who it is. And in fact, if the love of their life has decided not to set their settings in such a way so the phones can meet, greet, and introduce to each other, all they can know, like ships passing in the night, is that the person who's the potential love of their life is nearby, and they don't get to meet them. Now, that wasn't the intent of the service when it was set up. The intent of the service was set up was, think of it as a merger of dating websites meets social networks, because they never broke apart in the first place in Japan, and they started on mobile phones, so they're fundamentally different than the way we have them. But if you can imagine Facebook meets Friends or Dating.com on a mobile phone with sensitivity settings, that's kind of the life they're living. So they have this bubble around them as they walk through the mall, about 100 yards wide, a little less. And it says anyone within this 100-yard space is potentially somebody I want to meet. And if the bubbles hit each other, the phones introduced you to each other if you set the settings such that they can. This thing became a riot in the sense that it became a very, very popular activity. And I have always had this vision of teenagers wandering around malls in Japan going, oh, the love of my life, and not seeing them because they don't get the experience. So they develop the angst which they're looking for. I wanted to deliver that angst to the world. No, actually what I wanted to deliver was this notion of social networking meets phones, meets an impact on our lives. I wanted to have the notion where I could walk into this room and I could look at you and know that as it happens, we have a friend in common. Because over your head is a bubble and it says, you and I, kind of a LinkedIn on mobile phones meets Friendster, right? And we're sitting there and it says, oh, you and I both know Joe. I could walk up to you then. I could say, hi, I know you. You know Joe.